Well, we had a pretty interesting development happen to start this weekend off, and that is that the DualSense controller has been unboxed now, and the backing of it was also taken apart. So we got a little further into the controller. Remember, we did have some fairly blurry shots of the controller itself. We're going to take a look at two of the images here as well on top of the one that Austin Evans managed to get of the inside of the controller, but just like the back of it with his full unboxing. It was a good video. He tried out a couple of things with it, gave us a little bit of a tour of the controller very early on, by the way. To get it this early is pretty cool to see. So we're going to take a look at the inside of the DualSense controller as we see now, and then of course when the system and the controller is available, which apparently the controller is going to be available in like a week. It's coming out well before the system, so I guess we'll get it and do our own teardown here. I'm pretty excited to check it out because it seems like there is quite a bit of technology packed into this controller. I'm going to take a look at some of that technology here today. Guys, if you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that like button. Helps out a ton. And if you're new here to the Spawn Wave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. So let's go over here to the image that seems to be making the rounds now. This is from Austin Evans' video with the DualSense controller. And you can see the back of the controller with the plastics removed. And the one thing that's very good about this, after seeing them attempt to take it apart, which obviously they successfully did so, I can kind of see where some of the clips are. And this is something that helped me a lot with the Stadia controller. When Gamers Nexus took it apart and they basically destroyed the controller, I was able to pick out where all of the clips were, and that's why my teardown after the unboxing of it went much more smooth. It was not too hard for me to do it because they showed me where some of the clips were inadvertently in their video. So now, after seeing Austin Evans' video, I kind of already see how I'm going to take the DualSense controller apart and then be able to just kind of snap it back together. So thanks to Austin for that one. But we can see the back of it here. And you know what? I have to say, after just looking at this at face value, I understand why he didn't go much further than this, because let's say you were doing this. If you were looking at your DualSense controller just like this, would you go much further? I think most people wouldn't, even if they have that really cool iFixit kit that everyone seems to have, by the way. Why is iFixit not sponsoring this channel? I don't understand. Anyway, if we take a quick look at the controller here, it's very standard on the back where we have the battery. The battery is always the first thing after the back of it comes off that you seem to be able to get to with these PlayStation controllers. It's been like that for a little while now. With the PS3 controller, even the PS4, if your battery dies inside, it's not the end of the world to actually replace it. And in some cases, you can even upgrade it with your PS4 controller to, I believe, get like a 2,000 milliamp hour battery and give yourself some extra battery life with your controller. But once you get beyond that and you just unplug the battery, it becomes a bit more complicated, we can say. It does look like they have a bit of like a plastic skeleton kind of running through here that of course will help with the overall flexing of the controller being very minimal, but it also helps to support the battery that's here. We have the two triggers on either side, and that is, to me, the most interesting part about this entire controller, where tension can be changed, whether it's upped so that it's harder to pull the trigger, outright stopped even, as we heard with Deathloop, that if your gun jams, it will stop you from being able to pull the trigger, which is pretty cool. And even just apparently loosening it to the point where it's very easy to pull the trigger back and forth. We also have our advanced haptic feedback rumble motors down here, and these are pretty large. They're much bigger than the Switch HD rumble that's in like the Joy-Con controller or the Pro controller. It's hard to say why Sony went with this setup when it comes to how large they are, unless you think about, oh, they were figuring we're gonna have to fill up the DualSense handles completely with these motors to make sure it has a very even rumble all the way around. Now, they also pointed out that there appears to be a microphone on the back, as well as, of course, there is one on the front. Yes, that makes a lot of sense. We talked about this in a patent that Sony had produced that talked about having multiple microphones, and the only thing I can think of, and I think a lot of people are figuring this, noise cancellation with the controller. If you have one microphone on the back that is facing away from you at all times, unless you're, for whatever reason, talking to the back of your controller, most of us wouldn't when we're playing a game, it will be able to kind of read the ambient noise in the room or anything going on that's not you talking to your controller and work to process that out, essentially. So that's not like a new thing either. Cell phones have used it for a while, for example. So to do that is a good idea by Sony. And then, of course, we have another microphone on the front. And the other thing, I believe, is just the little reset button that you would use like a pin to press to like completely reset your controller if you had to, if something went wrong. Now let's talk a little bit about these adaptive triggers here, because this is the part that when I do get the controller, I want to go for immediately. I really want to see how these are put together and how they work in practice and in motion, because it's kind of hard to wrap your mind around it without actually having it in front of you, trying to press it and seeing how the mechanism exactly works. But we can take a little bit of a look here and a mild guess at how this is going down. So it looks like we have two different sections. And by the way, they appear to be completely modular as they plug in here and here with the battery connector right above that. And these seem to be just their own sections that can be replaced maybe outright. Remember, we did have the teardown before, where we have this one from Evzin Elite, where they took apart the controller, but unfortunately it was pretty grainy and hard to see. And then we had some other ones come out, and then people did AI upscaling for it to try to get a really good look at it. But this appears to be the separate module for those adaptive triggers, and this is probably our best way to really grasp or wrap our minds around how they're doing this. There appears to be a motor that is attached to this, and the idea is the motor will actually work against the normal movement of the trigger. So when you're going to press down, it's pretty normal. We would usually have a spring of some kind, and it was a very obvious and kind of linear feeling of pulling down on the trigger. There were no surprises when you would do it, and you always kind of had an idea as to exactly how tight or how loose the triggers were after you kind of got used to it over time. In this instance, it looks like it will actually almost wind against it. So here is this looks like R2 right here. And the way we're looking at this now is technically from the side, because we can see this little rubber stopper down here. And I've also been trying to figure out what that is. I don't know if that's where maybe the motor kind of sits in, and that would help to avoid any shock that would happen from it kind of spinning against it or just kind of moving against it. That would be my best guess, that it kind of slots in there. But if we look at where that little stopper is, and then we go over to the normal controller here, we can see that that's actually facing us. So that would be where the trigger would be pushing down towards. So if we go back to it, we can see that this is where the trigger is here, and then it moves down in this path, just like this. And we have this little piece here that would be working against it. So we have a motor that would probably spin with some sort of gear, and then in some instances adds a little bit of tension, some extra tension, so that when you press down, it would be harder, or it can, I guess, just even lock in place like we heard from the Deathloop developers. Now, if it is set up with a set of gears even in order to help that motor kind of get more in position, I would be interested to see the overall durability of that with the teeth that are in there, and make sure that, because I think of like it locking in place, and I'm like, well, what if somebody gets really angry and just pulls really hard on the trigger and snaps it? Is that possible? That's the one thing I would want to look at, is the overall durability, because the entire idea of adaptive triggers sounds really, really cool, because you can think of some of the gameplay possibilities, but I've seen the PS4 controllers get broken fairly easily at times. I've seen the PS3 controllers get broken. Those are really annoying to work on. This looks really annoying to work on. So I'm thinking in my mind, wow, they're probably modular for a reason, first of all, because they would make it at least a little easier to replace. But I see some instances where this could just be broken from use and frustrated gamers, or somebody who's just not having it with these adaptive triggers. For the most part, I think I'm just going to have to see this in motion, kind of moving, see the other side of this, of course, as it is moving. I don't know if I'm going to be able to see it actually like on and working, of course, because it seems like when you plug it in, you kind of lose sight of that, since you have to screw it all together here and then plug it in. Maybe I might be able to run the ribbon cable to it and just see what happens when it locks in place, or all these things. But yeah, Sony developed a really cool mechanism here for these adaptive triggers, and if they catch on, it could be really cool. There is, of course, always that concern that it's this really neat thing that gets really talked up at launch, and then developers just kind of stop using it. I hope that's not the case, because it does sound like a really cool idea. This is as far as Austin Evans went with the controller. Again, I don't blame him. Like, you get this cool DualSense controller. You probably don't want to completely destroy it. You got your look inside of it, and then you kind of move on. But we'll destroy it. We'll get it apart all the way, and then we'll put it back together. But I will get a full look at this when it comes out in roughly a week, apparently. So let me know what you guys think about the inside of the DualSense so far. What do you think of those adaptive triggers? Thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll see you next time.